4.2 Layer Types Explained. Hello there and welcome back. So in this video, we'll be discussing about different layer types that Photoshop offers so that you can better understand what's best for your project. Well, Photoshop uses different types of layer for different purposes. The first layer type we will discuss is this shape layer. This is red rectangle on our canvas and we can recognize it's a shape layer by looking at its thumbnail. I'll zoom so you can see it better. Okay, that's how you can identify its type through its symbol. Whenever you see it, you're dealing with the shape layer. To create them, you have all these shape tools in your left panel. The rectangle tools, the ellipse, lines, and custom shapes. Besides these, you can also create shapes through the pen tool, which we will discuss later in another lecture. The biggest advantage of this layer type is its vector properties. That means you can enlarge it to literally any size and it won't lose its quality. I'll hit Ctrl T to transform it and I'll make it as big as my canvas. As you can see, it's still sharp and that's because it's a vector. These types of layer are frequently used in web design and mobile app projects. They also help in various other scenarios, and that's where they really shine. They do have one drawback though, and that is they don't allow complete editing. Sure, I can change its size, shape, or color. By the way, for the last part, you can double-click its thumbnail and you can immediately see the change on the canvas as you move around this window. But I can't erase any part of it with this eraser tool. I also can't paint it with a brush, just like this. I can't use filters and all sorts of tools and features Photoshop offers at my disposal. Those vector properties comes at a price. Let me get my brush tool so I can illustrate my point. You see, I have this shape layer selected in my layers panel. Once I move my mouse cursor over my canvas, it immediately changes into a forbidden sign. That's because this layer type doesn't allow any sort of editing. Now moving on to the next layer type, raster layer. If I click anywhere, I'll get this message that says I need to rasterize it before I can paint over it. In case, if I hit OK, you will see I can paint over it, but I've just lost its vector properties. If I try to enlarge it, look what happens. Let me zoom in so you can see it better. Its edges are now fuzzy. Let me go back a few steps by pressing Ctrl Z so that we will have a shape layer back. So think about what you want to achieve before you use shape layer in your project. Just so this doesn't set you back, here's how you can rasterize any shape layer. You right-click that layer you want to rasterize, and in the Layers panel, and from this list, you can choose Rasterize Layer. And if you check the thumbnail, you now see it has lost its shape symbol. So now it's a raster layer. Speaking about that, raster layer are a preferred layer type in Photoshop. This is what you get when you create a new layer by clicking on this icon on the bottom of the layers panel. It's right here. A raster layer, how do you recognize its type? Well, if you check the layer panel, you will see no additional symbol in its thumbnail. It will always be clean. Don't be fooled by this checkered board. If I use them and change its color, you will now see that it is reflected in its thumbnail. But still, it has no symbol above it. So what's the deal with them? Well, they give you complete freedom. They gladly accept all edits. That means it's a versatile layer that you can use for all sorts of situations. Let me get my brush tool and I will repeat the previous test. Yep, here I can paint over it just fine, like this. So it seems like a fantastic choice. The downside is it loses quality when you try to enlarge it. I would say anything over 20% zoom will give you noticeable fudgy edges. Here, I'll scale it just a bit and you can already see how it has lost a lot of quality. I'll use Ctrl Z to go back to our initial state. Please note that all 4 layer types can be rasterized. Now let's move over to the next one, Smart Objects. Smart Objects are represented by this gear icon on the canvas. And you may be wondering, hey, that looks like a raster layer. Yep, they look similar, but that doesn't mean they are out of the same type. Check the layers panel and you will see it has different thumbnail. This symbol shows you this layer is a smart object. These are special layers that hold onto their information. Photoshop works with pixels. This raster layer has about, say, 12,000 pixels. I got that number by multiplying its dimensions. If I make it half that size with the help of Ctrl T, now it will have about only 6,000 pixels. The rest of them got thrown away. Yep, we can't get that back. If we try to enlarge it to its original size, you can see how it looks blurry. It's because Photoshop had to create 6,000 of those extra pixels that were no longer there. That's how the program deals with raster layers. But on the other side, a smart object tells Photoshop, you need that information later down the road. So if we shrink it down to 50% and then we scale it back up to 100%, you will see it looks just fine. That's because Photoshop was told to keep that information. So smart object sounds amazing, right? Actually, they are more than that. Any layer can be transformed into a smart object. Follow me on this. If we right-click the raster layer in the layers panel, we have the option to convert it to a smart object. You can see that here. You can see that here. And check the thumbnail and you will see it's a smart object now. That's great. But does this mean Photoshop found those 6,000 pixels it threw away previously? Of course not. The image is still blurry, but it's now been instructed to keep these existing pixels it currently has. So if I now shrink it down all the way to 10%, then resize it back to 100%, you'll see it now looks the same as before. We didn't lose any quality through this process. So again, any layer can be transformed into a smart object, and that means Photoshop will hold onto all those pixels it currently has. Furthermore, smart objects has a special attention from Photoshop algorithms. So this means that when you enlarge such a smart object layer, you will get a better result than when you enlarge a raster layer. But here's the catch. Smart objects are not directly editable. Not because Adobe wants to mess with you, but every layer type has its own purpose. If you right-click it and rasterize it, you have just lost all its spatial properties. On the other hand, it's a raster layer now, so it gladly accepts all edits. It's a big trade-off, but in a few cases it might be worth it. The next layer is text layer. Moving on, the next layer type is a text layer. This is similar to shape layers, where they can be resized to any dimension without losing quality. To make any changes to its appearance, we will use the character panel over here on your right. You can also open it by going to the top menu and find Window, then go to Character. Now, Character panel is activated. From here, you can change just about anything: font, family, weight, size, color, you name it, it's all here. What you can't do is edit it like a raster layer. You can right-click it and rasterize it, but this is highly discouraged. The thing is that text layers should always remain live. That simply means editable. If you rasterize them, then you will no longer be able to edit its content. Right now, it's live, and you can see that by looking at our layers panel. See this thumbnail? That means it's a text layer. Press T for the type tool, click it, and you can now perform various edits. When you're done, all you have to do is click anywhere on the canvas. Adjustment layer. The last layer type is the adjustment layer. It's not represented on the canvas because it doesn't have any actual pixels. This layer I created from this yin-yang symbol. Or say a partial black-white combination symbol here on this bottom. And their goal is to adjust existing pixels. Hence the term adjustment layers. In my layers panel, I have just such a layer. You can see it has a vastly different thumbnail. If I double click it, we can see this is an adjustment layer that controls vibrancy in saturation. As I move these sliders up and down, then my background layer also changes. All the other layers remained untouched because the stacking order is critical here. Here, this will affect all the layers underneath it in the layers panel. That's this folder that contains my text layers and the background. This is why all the other ones remain as they are. If I drag it above them, You'll now see the change. Let me move it back. Okay, that much wraps it up. We have discussed about all the 5 layer types in this short video class. Now we will learn about different blending modes in another video tutorial. Till then, as always, stay creative.